I just want to confirm that they can hear us.
Paul, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you.
Super.
Okay. Welcome to the July 14th, 2025 meeting of the Mobility Planning and Coordination Committee. As a reminder, this meeting is being broadcast to the town's YouTube channel and also via Zoom. It's being recorded for publication, later viewing, and administrative purposes. I have not been notified of anyone else recording the meeting, but if anyone wishes to do so, please notify the chair. And we'll take a roll call attendance. Tim Bolger, chair, is present. Duncan Allen.
Present.
Gus Streisand.
Present.
Stephen Frail.
Present.
James Goldstein.
Present.
Woo-Sung Kwan.
Present.
Justin McCullen.
Present.
Paul Malta.
Present.
And we have Tyler Gabrielski, DPW, Shane Mark, and Karis Lustig is here. She just stepped out. She'll be back. And first agenda item today is our public comment period. There's no one in the room. Is there anyone online? The hand raised.
We have Mr. Boolean and then I guess,
I don't see any.
raise your hand if you'd like to speak, otherwise we'll move to the next agenda item.
Seeing no hand raised, we'll move to the next agenda item. So move the minutes from June 9th, 2025. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? And is there any questions or comments?
Make a motion to approve the minutes. Second.
So we'll do a roll call vote. Tim Bolger votes aye. Duncan Allen.
Aye.
Gus Streisand.
Aye.
Stephen Frail.
Abstain, I was not here.
James Goldstein.
Aye.
Woo-Sung Kwan.
Aye.
Justin McCullen.
Aye.
Paul Malta.
I was absent, so I'll abstain.
All right, the motion passes. The minutes are approved. Thank you. And okay, so the next agenda item, moving right along, is the update on the Great Plain Ave restriping. We did speak last minute meeting about a couple projects we were talking about. And we kind of tabled a couple of them, and I think we were moving forward with Great Plain Ave. And if you want to maybe walk us through briefly. Is this the final iteration or is it still in development?
It is the final iteration of this project.
Okay.
With a asterisk, that the project, that layout, was designed such that it could be, added to at a later date. In terms of the, so essentially, I can share.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Remind us exactly what it's all about, please.
Yeah, no problem.
Just briefly, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So, this came about because, the town received, monies from, the transportation network, tax that is on Ubers and Lyfts, that are within the town borders. That money, we get an annual appropriation that is earmarked to be used towards sustainable transportation, multimodal transportation. So it was contracted with our designer, Fussin O'Neill, to do concept plans. This was the Harris Avenue and this section of Great Plain Avenue were looked at in parallel. Because they are adjacent to each other, and also the larger effort was to create a bicycle connection from the town line essentially to meet up with Dedham's. I believe they were piloting the bike lane there. I'm not sure if it is going permanent, but
Yeah, I think it was a pilot. It was removed, and I think they're just kind of continuing to try to
yeah. So
get momentum on that and hoping that our contribution makes their Dedham kind of work towards that as well.
yeah, so kind of a cross-border connectivity effort. The Harris Avenue section was, there were a bunch of iterations of that. We were attempting to sort of restart after previous efforts to avoid school pickup and drop off conflict, but due to the sort of murky future of Pollard, as well as the fact that Harris Avenue does not currently have any pavement markings, it was determined that we could table that until there's some more certainty about the future of that building. But the Great Plain Avenue section, there is a lot of there is more real estate out there for roadway width than there is in a lot of other places in town, but not quite as much as we would like to in the commercial area near Dunkin' Donuts, the pharmacy near there. So after several iterations that looked at removing parking in certain areas and trying various different configurations to try to retain it. Essentially, it would have required curb and sidewalk construction in order to fit everything within the right of way. And so this latest iteration is a version that retains the parking at its current location, but changes the road profile in such a way that the parking could be converted in maybe not in the entire stretch, but in certain select locations down the line. So as that version does not, some of the parking is moved off of the curb line to allow for a bike lane to go around it as sort of a parking protected section. And that is right here. So this, this is the Dunkin' Donuts over here. So the existing parking would be pulled off the curb, this indentation section on the Hershey Station MBTA side would be pulled out, and then there would be a buffer created to allow the bike lane to sort of go behind the cars to minimize conflict with people getting in and out of their cars, crossing the street, going to the businesses.
So the bike lane there is between the parked cars and the sidewalk?
That's correct.
Once it gets developed. Right?
No, it's just striping. So the striping.
Gotcha. So it's Sharrow heading towards Town Center and it's dedicated bike lane heading towards Dedham.
Correct. Yeah, so this is the connection with Harris Avenue. So essentially, it goes to Sharrow on the north side throughout this entire section with the commercial section, and then picks up as a bike lane once you get past Broad Meadow. The bike lane on the south side of the street is retained, and it has a buffer throughout, and then once you get to the Hershey Station, it goes behind the parked cars. And then meets back with the typical roadway profile after Broad Meadow Road. And then you have pretty much a traditional 2-foot buffer, or actually larger 4-foot buffer. Because there's quite a bit of width in this residential section, and it extends down past the golf course. This is a match cut here. Continues all the way to the Greendale Avenue intersection. One of the other changes that was made in this latest iteration was the addition of 2 stage bicycle turn boxes to allow left turns for bicyclists at the intersection. To accommodate the one on this side, on the northern approach. The crosswalk will be slightly shifted. This wasn't a big deal because the intersection is not actually ADA compliant at the moment, so there are no ramps at this triangle. The intersection as a whole is on our capital improvement plan in the next few years for potential for either a signal upgrades or a roundabout concept. Those are under design or in conceptual stages, but we'll be requesting design funding in the next couple of years. And
it's scalable, meaning that's, I know, because that's been one of the intersections that mentioned, it could be a traffic circle, et cetera, which would obviously change the dynamic of a lot of things, but nonetheless.
Absolutely, yeah. So it is a sort of interim plan, but one that is easy enough to do within our budget constraints.
Just me.
And then,
Can
yep.
I ask a question on that? The hashing and the buffer area? Are we planning on doing that? And I only ask because if you look at Greendale, we ended up not including the hashing in the buffer area just because of the cost of the additional striping.
It's up to us, it's up to,
So I think that was my
DPW.
question, was what I was sort of presenting. So there's there's a nice way of doing it. There's a cheaper way of doing it that drives our assistant superintendent of highway nuts, because it's like not perfectly aligned. So basically they just take a straight line on an angle. And so there's like a little gap because it's not perfectly lined up with the top and bottom lines. So there's that, or you can just leave it open. I know there was just some question when we did Greendale, although I think less now that it's more of established bike lane. Of like, what's the lane? Is it the gap or is it the lane adjacent to the curb line? So I think that's just like a bigger question, especially when we look at like long-term painting costs for what we're gonna be adding. What do we want to include and what we think is necessary to include? What do we want to include and what don't we think we need to include?
so the recommendation as best practices is to hash them, mainly to reduce that confusion you're talking about, where it may be unclear where the actual lane is versus, people may park in it or there's other issues, but I wouldn't say it's absolutely essential, but it would be recommended.
And are you talking about the black or the green in the intersection?
See these
I'm
little,
talking about the buffer lane.
Yeah, if you're thinking about Dedham Ave, the new one, next to the bike lane is a buffer, which is a.
yeah, so we
small
did
strip,
do it.
And it has a gore
here.
stripe, which is the kind of the diagonal cross lines as you see as they go down there.
Supposed to basically say, nobody should be in here.
Correct.
Yeah, this is the buffer space, yeah.
Like should be
Yep.
I will say that Dedham Ave as an example for whether or not it's there, I do believe that the parking in that bike lane may be reduced by having the gore stripe up there, because it looks more like a place that you don't belong with the car, where when the open ones on Greendale Ave are, it's kind of, if you don't see the bike person there, you don't know necessarily what it is, so. There may be more, I see more people parking in Greendale Ave than I do in the one in Dedham Ave, despite being, kind of. Used to having parking spaces there and.
So this is the question that I was gonna bring up in terms of obviously, as we get closer to Hersey, their parking restrictions have been there for years due to, getting people like not park and commute. All the way out here by Greendale, what percentage, and I listen, I'm all for bike lanes. I don't ride a bike, but nonetheless, but I also know that there are people that park on these streets and people who are used to parking on these streets, whether they need to adapt and change. And whether we need to help run that change management is one thing that I think we need to be vigilant of, but how much parking right now currently are we displacing percentage wise? From, I mean, it looks like
Yeah.
it's the entire extent, right?
Yeah, so what I see when I go on the residential side, not the little business corridor, because we're maintaining all the parking spaces in that area.
Yep.
Is very similar to what I would see like on Greendale. I think like what you would see on a wider, more trafficked road. And that it's not a lot of parking and it's mostly transactional. So it's like landscapers, delivery trucks. I don't see tons of like residents parking their own cars there for extended periods of time.
Surprisingly too, because it's kind of a de facto big parking lane on the road now, and I don't sure there are.
I don't think it's a comfortable place for people to choose to park. I guess I'll put it that way.
Okay, very well.
And I think Greendale's very similar. Now, people do park on the bike lane on Greendale. I don't think it's not like blocks of people parked, so I haven't heard a lot of complaints, nor do I think the police, have they heard a lot of complaints? Because I think bikes are navigating it without it being a major safety concern. I totally agree, though, if that becomes more of an issue where people want to park in front of their homes on roads that are more highly trafficked, because that's where we'd be putting these up, it does become an issue, but I don't see tons of people parking on this corridor.
And that's fine, and I'm satisfied with that, but just, we have to, as a committee, have to keep this in mind as we do more bike lanes, we are reducing the amount of traditional parking spots. Now, that can be changed through some sort of management program, et cetera, and try to, but nonetheless, we just have to be vigilant. Now, we also just do, I think what we do very well, which is not enforce until someone complains and becomes a nuisance, just like no throwing snow in the road, or, other things that we have that are on the bylaws that are just ridiculous, but nonetheless are called out when neighbor v. neighbor happens. We can either manage it that way and just kind of just not enforce it and deal with each, but we have to know that as we're doing more and more of these bike paths interconnecting, that we are traditionally taking away parking spaces that people have.
Yeah, I think there's a distinction to be made between parking spaces that are actually delineated as parking spaces versus like
Places people.
outside your front door. A lot of these residences have driveways, most of them, all of them, basically. So there is, at a certain point, you have to say, if we can't do them there, then where?
Yeah, I also would say, I think the roads that we're doing this work on tend to be, like, and I think this is where the design guide comes in, because you're not adding bike lanes in on like Meadowbrook, right? Like, that's where people, I do think, typically park more on the street. I feel like Dedham Ave is like a great example. Can you park on Dedham Ave? Yes, should you, or would you? Like, I think there's not a comfort level. And I think the roads where we're adding bike lanes are already uncomfortable to park on. No, again, I think people do. And I think what I hear more of is the delivery drivers and the landscape crews.
Right.
And again, they're only there for a certain duration of time. But I agree with you on the enforcement side. If we were a different type of community that was policing that a little bit more heavily, it would impact particularly, I would say, landscapers and their ability to access some properties.
I think a good example is that overnight parking. We have no overnight parking on streets anymore.
Yeah.
It's not enforced unless there's a snow emergency or a neighbor report.
Yeah.
Right.
But for the most
And
part.
that's why the nuisance,
Yes.
ordinances, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I just want us to be
Aware.
and listen, I'm the one who came in and said, I want to paint lines down a certain road because I wanted to control. But and I just said, all in the name of safety and all in the name of this, and then got just absolutely eviscerated on that. From the public engagement perspective, I just don't want us to have to be in the same position where I would say what the TSC wanted to really push was safety and whatever, and then suddenly we all got smacked. And maybe I'm shell shocked from that, but I also we have to be vigilant about the public engagement aspect.
Line is that they know that, all those people know that it is gonna happen?
This concept basically, was. Sent to me today. So,
So I think the question is on the notification. Now, I will say, when we did, whether this is the right or wrong and what the practice would be. When we have taken major roads and added bike lanes to them, so when we added them to West Street, when we added them to Greendale, and when we added them.
Dedham.
We did with Dedham, I'm trying to think, we did on Great Plain, but I don't know if they were technically bike lanes or if we just painted 4-foot shoulders.
They show.
We did not notice the abutting properties because we weren't making any permanent changes to their right of way. Whether or not we should simply send out a letter that says, we're doing this and to the neighborhoods, I mean, I think that's a question. I don't think it warrants the same level as like changing curb lines and putting in new traffic calming features or something like that, but I think the point is taken that we may think that paint is innocuous and others may not think the same. Just as far as communicating that out to the public.
Oh, Lou, did you have something to say? Sorry, I had to say that.
Oh, no, I was just gonna remark in terms of access to that little business district. There is kind of a wider community, including, our neighborhood, which spend a lot of time there and, create a lot of vehicle hours and parking demand, at Junctions in particular. And right now it's marginal, but it's really volatile. All it takes is them to have somebody not show up for work and 9:30 looks like Grand Central Station. And, they do have a, envision Needham sign up, which indicates they're very much aware of the issue. I'm just thinking that, I don't know. Yeah, if there's a territory around there that
It is.
is the shed,
It's maintained here. in that
Yeah.
area, On both sides.
So all the allocated designated parking is going to be maintained.
And then it's gonna extend on the side where Dunkin' Donuts is all the way to Hazel's.
Yeah.
So the back lane will be removed in that area. So there is a section where it won't be.
oh, yeah, there's some people who,
Can you just tell me, between, is that hillside on the far left there? Oh, wait, no, we're near.
This is
Green Hill.
Green
Go back
Hill.
down to Dunkin' Donuts, sorry.
Yeah. So this
What are
is
those
Hillcrest.
signs next to Hillside?
2-hour parking.
2-hour parking, that's what they say.
Yeah, next to Hazel's is, there are 2-hour parking.
Which I
signs.
believe is currently what it is now to prevent,
Yeah. People using it.
people using it as a commuter rail parking, yeah.
Great.
So, Harris, you said that parking is allowed on Dedham Ave.
Yeah.
Does anybody ever, I mean, I've never, seen. I mean, maybe a landscape.
We had one person,
Yes.
What's that?
we had one person who was parking up on the sidewalk. It was actually one of the reasons we added in, as part of the Complete Streets project. We added in, granite curb was to, I guess, discourage long-term parking on Dedham Ave.
I mean,
Because the problem is they were going up over the curb and they were parking basically in the sidewalk, which is the worst option that we have. At least if you're parking on Dedham Ave, you're sort of doing so at the risk of the vehicle, not at the risk of a pedestrian.
Right. Oh, woo, if you're.
Yeah.
If you can, there you go.
Yeah. So I don't have a big opinion on the parking side, but I just wanted to ask a minor question on the bike box on Greendale Ave. I saw that there are 2-stage bike boxes, and I just wanted to ask you the verdict of why it's a 2-stage one instead of bike box in front of the traffic lane.
So from what I understand from state guidance, I actually just, went, to a training about this particular issue recently. And, the state prefers, the queue boxes, for reasons of comfort for cyclists that are less experienced. So if you have the alternative for these two, for those that may not be familiar, the alternative to these 2-stage boxes is what was in the previous versions there, right before the crosswalk.
Right.
There were green boxes right here that essentially, so that if you're turning left, say you're on Great Plain and you're turning left to go up Greendale, cars are supposed to queue behind the green box and bicyclists stay here right in front of the cars. And then when the light turns green, the cyclists have a bit of a head start to turn left. I will tell you that from my lived experience, as a cyclist, but also just from the guidance that I've seen from NACDO, from the state, that if you give, if you're hoping that people are gonna stop behind that green box, they don't always do that. There's also the fact that you have cars that are behind you ready to go through the intersection, and you essentially have to get out of their way, turn left, while they're coming up behind you. If you have these 2-stage boxes, you're essentially continuing through the intersection when you have the green light. And then, you're waiting here until you have that green light to proceed, through the other, direction of the, so you're basically. It's almost like you're creating a shorter cross, like you are ultimately going a little further, but you're making it 2 shorter crossings instead of one sort of unprotected left turn. So, I had asked them to make that switch. I don't, the studies that I have seen from the state indicate that the 2-stage turn boxes are utilized more frequently than the traditional bike boxes in front of vehicle traffic.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've seen them a lot in the city of Boston, but I just thought that they're more utilized when it's a multi-lane roadway instead of, just two-lane traffic. But yeah, that's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, it's one of the larger intersections in town. And I think it's a comfort level thing.
It's a good thing. Yeah.
It's a very big intersection.
What I observe is, as a very nearby resident, is that the bicycle traffic, in terms of its character, is really high-end, serious bicyclists. And this is almost a link in that it's serving kind of the function of the rail trail through Needham Center. It's people from Newton going to Dover and Sherborne. And they're not having no compunction whatsoever about stopping in the main traffic lane. They're gonna turn left and you're gonna wait for them to do it. And yeah, it's, I understand taking care of, the next tier of bicyclists, but most users there are pretty serious bike people.
Yeah, so the sort of the typology of the infrastructure, you essentially have 60% of people fall in the, I think that's called the concerned cyclist category, which are essentially people that are only comfortable when there's dedicated bike infrastructure. Then you have the basically 10%, I think it's 10 to 15% of people that are those really experienced cyclists that they don't mind going in mixed traffic. They don't mind so much the maneuvering across intersections without dedicated infrastructure. So I take your point, but I think that even that 10% are still going to they're not going to see it as a significant trade-off to go for this version versus the other. It just takes a little, it takes if those experienced cyclists want to make that left-hand turn, they're gonna do it whether there's green paint there or not.
So Tyler, I'm unfamiliar with this two-stage box concept. Does it give bicyclists a head start with an arrow or something, or what's the benefit?
So there's no, there are no bicycle specific signals at the intersection, and there are none being added through the project.
Mhm.
Essentially what happens is, rather than when you're waiting here, you get the green light and then you're making this left-hand turn as one motion.
Are you coming off of Great Plain to Greendale right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so instead of making that as one motion where you have cars that are going to be proceeding behind you through the intersection. All you do is when you have this green light, you ride your bike through this green section right here, and then you wait. This has the red light at this point. You wait here at this box.
And then go.
And then when this cross traffic turns
Okay,
green,
okay.
that's when you go straight across, and so you essentially have
It's forcing the
two-stage
bicyclists
turn.
to actually not make the left turn right off of Great Plain.
You don't have to swing the left turn.
Yeah, you don't swing the left turn, so the distance on the swing left turn is shorter on its own, but each stage of the two-stage is shorter,
Okay.
you know what I mean? So you're basically breaking it in half.
I get it.
Yeah.
This exists now at Highland Ave and Webster Street, so if next time you go through there, you probably never see it because you don't notice it, but
Okay.
it exists there now and allows you to take. You think about that bike lane that's on Highland Ave, in front of where the dead end bank is, it lets you get from way over here to across. And I think what Wu was talking about was it's usually on multi-lane roads to get across a couple lanes, but it kind of makes the turn a little bit easier.
Okay. Thank you. I get it now. I just wasn't following.
Sure. And Paul?
Yeah, is there a pedestrian crossing signal at that intersection right now?
Yeah, there are pedestrian signals there. They are not the ones we like, but they exist.
Okay. And so I understand that like paint is less than any other piece of equipment, but could there be, I think I've seen like crossing signals that are both pedestrian and bike. And so then if both of those happen at the same time, then the bikes would have full access to the intersection, right?
Yes, but the scope of that would fall under the intersection capital project rather
I see.
than, so So I don't disagree with you. The other thing is, you know, this could be a roundabout, in which case the entire traffic flow would be different. I think that the idea is that this is a really large intersection, and we're just trying to make it so that it can be crossed in segments rather than you pressured to go across the entire corner to corner in one movement.
To be updated when we get to that intersection.
Right, so it's that interim thing. I think this is a good stepping stone for whatever else ends up happening at the intersection.
I agree.
One more question, way over near Harris, there's a crosswalk, is that new? It's not. Way over, yep, there it is.
By Harris?
Yeah. It's
Is it
not
new?
This one?
Yeah.
No.
The
No,
north
it's-
south, no, it's
This
there.
one has an RFB here,
Oh, yeah.
so it's
So it's
fully
existing,
compliant,
it's existing,
yes.
okay, just a restripe.
Yeah, so we're the only, this is, there's gonna be a gap in the buffer here, so essentially I'm not sure of the condition of the markings now, but it may not even
Okay.
be necessary to
Mhm.
restrict
Okay.
them, although they'd probably use a refresh and they'll be there anyways.
And when is all the restriping supposed to happen?
So one of the reasons why we decided to do this now is because we're gonna be doing a surface treatment on this section of Great Plain Avenue in August, so probably. It'll probably be the third week of August, we'll do the resurfacing, and then we typically would put the markings back a week or two after that. There'd be temporary markings there for just like this, you know, you see like
Yeah.
those yellow center line stickers that they put out, they'll do temporary, and then it's usually a week or two after.
So almost.
That's great. So it'll be like around the time for the new school year.
Yeah,
Fingers crossed.
This is coming to mind right now because we're doing this, although this is probably not under NPCC, but something that's coming to mind. Green Street has a stop line. It does not have a stop sign, because I think it was a hit at one point years ago. So that's one thing that if we can refresh that sign, Green Street and Great Plain. There's a stop line, there's no stop sign.
okay,
Just, it's kind of, because I know that's. We want to try and make sure these intersections aren't gonna go into bike lanes, you know, that don't have a stop sign.
yeah. No,
But
okay.
and there currently already is a line there, so I'm assuming there's a regulation. At some point already there, so we don't have to go up and this is just a replacement of a sign. We can obviously look up the regulation history, but I don't think it's a new regulation. But just given the traffic or whatever, just from a safety perspective.
No, that's
It
good.
goes into a bike lane. On it, you know.
Yep, that's good to note. I will make a note of that and we will verify about the regulation and we'll, if it's already stopped, then we will put a sign there.
But there's a line. And more, we have a couple of.
Oh, that's interesting. They're there all the time.
The parking spots, is that the way it's gonna be painted? Let's say, I see those boxes there. Is it just gonna be the T markings? Or is it gonna be like fully marked out with an edge line, etc.?
It's really up to our discretion.
It is,
You
yeah.
know, I think that, it is cheaper to do the Ts.
Yeah. What you meant, Kara's mentioned about, I mean, the hatchings. I was one other thing I was wondering and I don't know how it. If you don't want to do with the hatching, is there maybe an idea to go, let's say, the edge line as a 6-inch? And on the curb side, maybe do a 4-inch. And then not do the hatching because you get a little extra emphasis on going to a wider line instead of doing the hatchings, because the hatchings must be very expensive.
Yeah, I think the thicker line is also more expensive than the thinner lines, but yeah, no, I hear you.
I think
Just
for
a
me, no, it's valid. I think for me, the marking should be clear.
Sure.
It should be clear where the lane is and where it's not.
Mhm.
And I think that sort of non-traditional configurations could cause some confusion. That's like my
Yeah.
thought.
Mind.
Yeah.
I think it works on Dedham Ave, I think it will work here. the parking protected bike lane is gonna be, I think, kind of thinking about the future, like, how does this project work into like what we're thinking about in the future? But the parking protected bike lane is a good example to show some residents what that looks like. Because there's a lot of conversation about like, oh, you can't park off the curb and like all those other things. Well, here, here it is, and residents will be able to experience that and see what it's like. And I think that the parking protected buffer is also gonna be a very comfortable thing, like getting to the train station. Maybe some kids going to school will be in like that section there is a little bit safer, if there's the parking protecting is there. Kids are riding on the sidewalk now, kind of inside there, and the doors are opening. From cars parking there, and the exhaust in the winter from cars parked. On that side of the street kind of funnels in there, so like all of this is really good.
I agree.
Outside of just the bike lane itself, and when, when you look at the road, it's 40 feet wide. The lanes existing today are 15 feet wide, which is extremely dangerous and kind of promotes fast speed, so going down to 10 feet down here where people are crossing the road frequently, I think it will be nicer. In the center, kind of as you go through the business center, kind of getting out and walking across the street and all those things.
Yeah.
The pedestrian crossings are gonna be shorter, so there are a lot of other things other than just.
Narrow
bike
lanes are great.
Yeah, I think
I
that,
love 8.5, but that's my magic number.
Make every engineer nervous.
Yes.
I think, the narrowing will have the most significant impact more than any other feature of the design, so.
Great,
So I just want to add on to that. So I was talking to, we talked about reaching out to the neighborhoods. One of the things we have done on all of these projects is we have talked to the select board before implementation. So I'm looking at getting on the agenda for August 12th, just to discuss generally the concepts and making sure that there's support for moving forward on the project.
And just to weigh in on your thought about potentially just sending out a letter, I don't think you can over communicate to the abutters. I agree with you, it's not a major change, but just letting them know shortly in advance, I don't think is a bad idea, but if you think it creates too much hassle and pushback, I understand, but I do think notice is not a bad thing.
I don't think we're opposed to notice. I think it's just, the form.
How to do it effectively, I think, how to not be overburdened, and also how to best communicate what our intentions are, because I think sometimes if they're like, oh, they're doing project work on my road, I'd like this, or I'd like that, it's like, nope, it's very specific, we're doing painting, like, it's not,
Right,
you know what I
I
mean?
agree, if you can communicate that succinctly in a letter to the abutters and not open it up, I think that's ideal.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, like, oh, your road's gonna be narrower, so those cars will be going slower, and like, well, all of the other things. But people will focus on.
Right, so yeah, I'm not adamant
Yeah.
about it, I just think.
Yeah.
Good point. Okay. All right, we'll move on, any other discussion?
So I just want to say the next steps, we contracted with, this designer, we added to their contract essentially to, finalize this design and then create a version that will allow our team to lay out the striping plan. So when the resurfacing happens, in August, our plan would be to, work with engineering to help lay it out in the fields for the marking crew to come in, and the marking crews come in at, overnight to apply the markings.
I think a comment I heard from people at a different committee that I'm on, was that the green paint sometimes smells.
It does.
I don't know if like you put, like, when you do it, like on your Facebook page or something, you just like, the smell is temporary, even though it sticks around for a while, but
Is that from like the retro
the
reflective?
green.
It's actually the
Bead.
methyl, it's a different, compound in the paint. It's not the actual reflective element of it, it's the type of paint that it is. It's like a special
Like trying to get shades.
plastic, like.
Yeah, so might want to put like some information out, like,
Like something on their face, because they have high traction for yeah, but they could put something.
Yeah,
It
it's
smells for a period of time.
Smell for
Repost
a
of
period of time.
town meeting
A very short period, I
for
assume.
DPW post.
It basically wears off within a month or two.
Yeah, it does smell for a while.
Yeah.
It's persistent.
You know, it's outside, but the, it's really durable. That's the idea behind it, is that that particular compound is very durable as compared to like latex paint. It would also be, we wouldn't apply the green paint the same night that we would be applying the, so typically what happens is first you do the long lines, the center line, the edge line, then another crew comes in and does the handwork. So the short lines, the symbols, things like that. So-
You can, if you can push, I mean, I know we want to do this before school, but if you can push like the green paint into like September, October, the temperature and the humidity will definitely has an impact on precipitancy of smells. If you do that, Cambridge did the green paint and the dog days of summer, and it was awful.
We can
It
certainly,
was just all entrained, and it was just, certainly out in, the fall and the crisp, drop in humidity, you're gonna find a lot less.
we can try. I will say there are only 2 companies in the entire state that do markings, and they do all MassDOT as well, so we tend to be a little bit at their mercy as opposed to the other way around, but.
We also, it's also not advisable to apply paint when it's not, when it's too cold, so.
I'm sure, it's just when that temperature,
Right.
it's the humidity.
Yeah, we're probably talking about,
Nobody's in need in the moment.
later September.
It's true,
Yeah.
that is true. There's
That's
no
the
other
latest you can do it.
All right, there any more discussion, we'll move on. The next one is the semi-annual meeting of the transportation committees for the fall. Seems like just last week we had the last one. But Stephen, you did speak at some point when we talked about this a while ago about, the importance of it being in September for funding and kind of.
Yeah, I think you probably even back up. So over the summer is when select board needs to go over their goals for the year. And there's always more goals than there is time. So if there's a significant investment that this or the other committees are looking for the town to make, but now is the time to put that on the select board's map. Because if it doesn't go onto the select board's goals, it's not gonna get work next year. And then your next intake is next summer. So just thinking in terms of like the whole budget process, you've got goals, then you've got the town manager working with FinCom on the preliminary budget in the fall, which pretty much wraps up in December.
So our budget is due, I was talking to the deputy town manager about this, usually at the end of October.
End of October.
The capital is a little earlier. I would say generally speaking, like we have a pretty robust 5-year capital plan. So, there's some latitude because we have funds marked for infrastructure that for our roads program and our sidewalks program are not nailed down to specific projects yet, just because things happen. Weather happens, winter happens, and so we don't want to commit a 5-year plan that says every dollar goes to each individual project. So we have a kind of a running list of priorities, and we work that list down based on the funding we receive each year. What it does, what is a little more funding specific, or like the larger intersection improvements, that sort of thing. If we did put something like a rail trail on, something larger, and that almost always will go in the 5th year of the capital plan, but the timeline still applies, right? We have to put it in now or before the, really September to get it there. And I would say if it's something that's more from the committee, that's sort of the idea, that's the nugget. That's not the fully fleshed product that we need to get for the capital plan. So that also would take time working with consultants, figuring out, the logistics of it, and then how would it fit in and what the cost might be, because that's obviously the biggest item when we look at the budget. So I think the timing that you have is correct.
Right, so it's the from idea to fruition is
Yeah, and I think
5+ years.
Yeah, and I think the other thing we've talked about, which may be worth having a conversation in the bigger committee, is funding requests we have for more standardized requests. So we have sort of the same number of miles we've been targeting for sidewalk, roadway. Now we've added in curb ramps into the mix. Is that the right mix, right? Like, are we investing the right amount in our roads? Are we over investing, under investing? Sidewalks we've talked about, but then obviously we have to figure out like, well, if you go from 1 mile to 2 miles, we really can't go from 1 mile to like 9 miles, right? Which is where we probably want to be. That might also be worthwhile to have as part of that conversation about where do we want to put our emphasis on transportation improvements.
Right, those chips, where are your chips gonna go?
Just a question about that process. I've weighed in past years with the select board about goals, but without necessarily full-fledged projects and detailed budgets and so forth, rail trail related. And I think that's fine, isn't it?
Mm.
I mean,
For the goals
That's
process,
the
it works
goal.
fine.
process.
For then getting it into a budget and an actual
Right.
project, it just has to be more fully fleshed out. And what I'm saying is that process takes at minimum 5 years.
You also don't have to have all the information to put in something as a placeholder, and as it works its way down the line, you have to add more and more detail.
When it's in the 5th year, you need a ballpark number. When it's in the 1st year, you need to know an
Sure.
exact price quote.
To kind of fill in what you made the comment of, it just feels like it was yesterday for the other meeting, and I remember speaking with Matt and Mary Ann about coming up with this committee, the whole idea of coming up with this committee and the purpose of it, et cetera. I think we were a little overzealous by saying 2 a year, but I think that perhaps I would try to modify the charters and say at least once a year, that would giving us the ability to do a second. But I think the one in the spring is really the one that's more facing of the public to say, these are the projects that I think, that we can do, and doing more of what Tyler has done, saying, this is kind of like a plan for the year. We're coming out from the winter. We know that we're gonna have a shorter, or earlier spring. This is what is planned. That's more like a public engagement side. And I think the one in the fall is really where these committees should really concentrate, to your point, Stephen, about what it makes sense from goals from a getting onto the 5-year plan, getting onto, figuring out, should reprioritization of some things, should we kind of focus in on some of the help TPW to provide some sort of guidance on the sidewalk plans or whatever it may be. That's more of like the working meeting. And then I think the more kind of, for lack of a better word, dog and pony show, but the more of like the getting it out there, the public engagement, that's more of the spring one. Because I think that's really, because that's what people want to know, what roads are going to be done, whatever. That's the once a year. This is the one. So, but I think by keeping us to only one, just so that we don't get
I agree.
smacked and say that, oh, you're supposed to do 2, because that happens, things happen earlier spring, later springs. There's a whole litany of reasons of why we may not be able to hit and be able to do 2 larger 3 multi-committee meetings. But so I'm really coming up with 2 things. One, just see if we can change our charter. And I look at whether it's just the MPCC's charter that has it in there of saying 2 a year to at least 1 a year. And then the second one is to reiterate and saying that, yes, the fall meeting is the important one for the goal setting and budget setting and that sort of
I
stuff.
would modify, just say that I think fall's too late for goals.
Okay, fair.
But it might be like supporting the budget ask. How do we best support the budget ask? And that might involve outreach to FinCom, out to town meeting. There's other avenues that the committee could use.
Mhm.
I think the analog that I would have is in the climate action plan committee. We had a process by which we went through, here are the things that we need in order to make progress. And at one point, we decided we needed a consultant to really help us advance beyond a preliminary stage of that climate action plan. And we took that to the select board and they endorsed it, and, we were asked for funding. Ultimately, didn't get the funding through the budget process, but we ended up with an article, a specific article to allocate that funding, which town meeting did vote in favor for. So I think one of the questions, I still struggle with, because I'm very much new to this committee here, I don't know, and we've had this conversation, where could we make more progress if we had more resources versus even if we had more resources, we can't really make any progress because we don't have the staff to manage those additional resources. That's where I keep kind of coming back to, is 1 mile of sidewalk enough per year? Could we double that, triple that? Multiple of 10? I don't know what the creative solutions are, but it seems to me that it would be like a really good collective brainstorming idea for us to go into the summer thinking. This is our BHAG, or big area addition goal, is the double amount of sidewalks that we put in next year. How do we do that? I don't know if it's possible, right? And this is where I would really defer to you, Kairos. Like, where is that gap that we could close
I know my answer.
For reduction, you mean?
Yeah, I mean,
within 12 months?
I think. At least what I've seen in the past 3 years
Yeah.
from. A lot of our projects, but I'll specifically say on the roadside. We have increased our capacity for doing work significantly. When I just think about the complexity of the projects we're doing, because I think, again, historically it was. We did a lot of work, but I think it was just pave it and replace it. It wasn't reimagine it. And I think that that's where the engineering side of it, it just adds more complexity to each project that we do. And just the volume, I think, has just increased over the past couple of years. So I think, the things that I'm sort of thinking about, but like markings design, right? Like, so even just Tyler was talking about the back and forth. I think in a perfect world, this is something we might have been able to present fully fleshed out at the spring meeting, right? Thinking that we might get more eyes from the public on a bigger meeting like that. I think, whether that's having the right amount of, I don't know if that's a staffing issue or an outsourced, like, resources issue. And then the other thing is just sort of how everything interplays and reacts, like interacts with each other. And I think that's where that road design guide kind of becomes helpful as well. And then I think on the back end of it is how do these things impact the operating budget? Because we've had talks internally about, like, everyone loves an RFB, but we've like doubled or tripled the amount of signage that we have in town in the past couple of years because we've added all these new components that are more sophisticated. We still have the one FTE that is responsible for managing all these systems. That was the same FTE that was responsible for managing them 15 years ago. So I think that's sort of also the question. I was thinking the same thing with markings, right? Like, I have no aversion to adding more markings to the town for a whole host of reasons, but every single time we add markings, that's additional annual cost that we have for refreshing those markings. So I think that's kind of the conversation to have about the interplay between the additional amenities that we want to offer or the changes we want to make, and then how does that impact the operating budget as well? And is that staffing, if we get another $1 million for sidewalk, that might not hit a tipping point, but beyond that might hit a tipping point of we don't have the resources to manage that. And right now, Tyler will tell you, he's got probably half of his staff out there doing construction management at this point.
Right. Totally agree with everything Kara said. I really think we need to build out the markings, the planning, the design, the maintenance of all these signs and different markings that we're adding, because our current programs and processes are focused almost entirely on maintenance and on and then everything that's not maintenance is put into the capital plan and this funded that way. But for these sort of things in between, like, if I didn't have this TNC money, we would not have this concept. There's no, we don't have a pot of money within our budget for these concepts and developing these designs. So we have to be very judicious about which projects we use them on. And again, we have one guy that's responsible for all the traffic signage in town, installing, maintaining, adding new. He does all of the supervision for when the markings crews come in. He's the only one basically that, so if he's on vacation, they're not coming in, for that week. So I think that side of things is what needs to be built out, and how we need to allocate.
If you were to think of that as like a 12-month goal, is that coming up with the plan, so to speak, coming up with a playbook, or is it more of a?
So I think the road, I can't remember calling it, the road design guide will be very helpful in trying to help us figure out, okay, how many of our roads do we think are gonna have these additional amenities that will then have additional cost? And I didn't even think about a couple of the really large projects we have going on too. So like Mark Tree, for example, they're already funded, so they're not in that, but we're gonna be putting the road back in a very different way than it is today, that'll have different maintenance needs too. So I think looking at,
Will that road design guide have cost implications as a component of it?
no, but I think we can extrapolate, like, if we know that we're doing X amount of markings in a certain 1 mile space, we can kind of pull that out and say, if we have 50 miles of main roads that then need to have bike lanes, potential separation, yellow lines and parking amenities, then we can say, okay, it'll cost this much per mile, and that's roughly what it would cost.
Yeah, because it's not actually designing any projects, right? So it's something to keep in mind.
But if that sign says we want to put markings on every single road in town, that's a very different,
Yeah.
workload than what we currently have.
I'm just curious, have you attempted to come up with something like a maintenance factor and stuff like that, like construction value needs like 5% of that value per annum or whatever on
The
average?
markings or
But
like,
yeah, things in general. I know it can run from 2% to 15%, depending on what it is. But, just kind of, we're gonna spend $1 million, okay? Are we also in effect saying we're gonna spend 50,000 forever?
the
to maintain
primary basis of our budget process is our historical spending over the past usually 5 to 7 years, and then our contract unit prices, because almost all this work is contracted out. So those two factors combined with an inflationary index, that's the way that we account for that.
Yeah. You're ultimately gonna capture it all, but I guess the question is, looking forward, if your plan is actually to increase the stock of things that you are going to maintain, I don't know if you have a way of getting a handle on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, without, in terms of the markings, right, we have a budget that is based on the need to maintain the existing markings. It's not a budget that encapsulates, oh, we're gonna add X amount of markings, over the next year, so it kind of needs to almost be like a complementary bucket of money.
And that's the thing we need to, when CSC says, let's add X, Y, and Z, you almost need to add, say, 5% or, 10% more in that budgetary item to allocate for maintenance of whatever we're putting in, because we've done markings, we've done signs, we've done a lot of things that we've started now having increased. Town meeting gave now $100,000 this past year, 2 years in a row, which is great. Thank you, FinCom. And town meeting, but it obviously, that adds to what we put in. It doesn't do anything with maintenance. I completely understand that. You know what I mean? I know it's that same concept of we need to kind of figure out
And
what's the carrying.
yeah, and then the bigger picture is like, we have an article that we have requested for reconstruction. And the only road that is on there, has been on there, is Mark Tree. So all these other projects we've done have been like sort of making do with the right of way that we have and making modifications to make them safer within that limited capacity. I would say the next, and maybe this is why the next kind of large reconstruction projects we have would be Highland Ave and would be Great Plain Ave on the 2 larger projects. But there are no other roads right now in the queue in the out years for what may be needed for large reconstruction. I know, like, we've talked a lot about Webster Street, for example, and it's like, why can't we add bike lanes? I'm like, raise bike lanes, right? And it's like, well, there's a lot of factors that go in there, including having to deal with the right of way, having to deal with, trees and poles and drainage and everything else. And so we don't have anything in the queue to do any like large modification right now outside of those 3 projects I just referenced. So if that is also a priority, right? If Webster is eventually a priority, that's not something that's currently in our budgeted queue.
I wanted to go back to talking about what Stephen raised, thinking strategically here about the goals and the ultimate budget process, because I've been frustrated as the rail trail rep that years ago, I think 3 years ago now, the extension of the rail trail to Chestnut Street was, I think, a 1 or 2 year out project, and then it was pushed back quite a bit without a lot of rationale other than higher priorities elsewhere, I guess. And I have been ineffective despite writing letters on behalf of the rail trail of the Bay Colony Rail Trail Association and the Rail Trail Advisory Committee in getting that pushed up. It's a different kind of project than what Stephen and you, Karis, and Tyler have been talking about, which are ongoing capital improvements, I guess, or operational improvements and maintenance, but I think it's a very important project. I'm wondering if there is space in this committee to talk about that and to see if if this committee would be supportive of advocating for the rail trail extension.
Yeah, and I think for all the projects that we talk about, right, the select board priorities are going to, there's only so many dollars in, and it's not an evaluation of if people like or don't like a project. It's really how do you allocate your resources?
I would consider it priority.
Yeah, I mean, I would say what's interesting on that one is now that Dover is dipping their toes in the water, it makes it different, right? Than maybe 2 years ago when Dover was not being as cooperative. And I think you and I have talked about this. There's sort of the traditional path of, do you go through the town process for funding?
Right.
Or do you find external funding?
Right.
And the fact that now, Needham as a whole, our project is not the most exciting project for like the state to pick up for a larger rehabilitation. Which is probably the kind of dollars that you would need to bring into a project like that, between the bridge and
Right.
the
I'm
connection.
not even talking about the bridge yet.
Yeah.
But it is.
Yeah,
intimately
but I
linked.
think,
And it really
the thing
makes
is
it
now,
worse.
it's like, well, now you're a regional
Right.
rail trail that would connect two communities that don't have MBTA access
Right,
to an economic center.
Right.
To a MBTA, both the bus and the
Yes.
train, and also an ice cream place, which is like the rule of all. So there's like a tourism aspect to it as well. You and I have talked about like the current trail, which is lovely, really doesn't have the vitality that you want from a trail, and that you don't have enough people going on it, and you get vandalism and other issues where, as if it really did become a
Right.
more used amenity, a lot of those issues will go away.
exactly, yeah.
So I think there's support for it. It's just finding dollars for recreation to begin with is difficult. I think that's why like CPC was created in the first place, because it carved out dollars to go to that instead of things like repaving a road. So I think that's where the challenge is, but I think from this committee's perspective, even just trying to keep it on the radar of if it doesn't fit in the 5-year plan, which it might not, right?
Well, it's already in the goals of the select board, but I
Right.
guess it's
There's
not.
no funding allocated to it, and it's not in a
There's no
5-year
funding,
plan.
that's true.
I think the committee can certainly continue to figure out like, what does that project look like? And are there other funding sources available that might be a fit if it doesn't fit into the town's resources? But I think that's true with any of the projects we're looking at too.
I think by keeping that, I do think that we should keep it on the forefront, but also from the aspect of our sidewalk plan, which we know feasibly not adding sidewalks, or we just can't because we don't have the money to add sidewalks to areas that people have been asking for decades. The rail trail can certainly
Sure.
add an interconnectivity point between an area that is underserved by sidewalks into the downtown center and continue up the spine from, so I think that there is an economic
Yeah.
factor as well to kind of push this from a mobility perspective. So I think we should still keep it on the radar, and I think external funding is really where it's gonna be. I don't see us with the schools.
No, I agree, although CPC is a real possibility, although it's gonna all go to housing for the short.
Yeah, they don't have a
Yeah.
lot of immediate resources, yeah.
Although
that
10%
funding
has
makes
to go to recreation, so.
No, so there is no bucket for recreation.
For
Open space,
Oh, open space.
but I'm not sure, I guess this would be like skirting the
It's
line.
funded it twice before.
So the recreation component funded it before, it's a little complicated, there's 10% allocated to open space, 10% to housing, and 10% to historic
Right.
preservation. The rest of it, the 70% goes in the open bucket.
Right.
And recreation is one of the uses you can use.
Right,
So it came out of the recreation.
Right.
Item, but that also could be competed with the other 3 items as well. So housing could also get its hand on the 70%.
Sure.
Historic can get its hand on the 70%.
sure.
But I think the other thing is, because now. Like, you're working with this commit, or the rail trail, this
Yeah.
component is on this committee, is part of us, like DPW is on the committee.
Yeah.
We are the single largest proposer of capital projects in the town. I think, the way Tyler had proposed it before, if you have something in the fifth year, but even like, they have what we call a future form. So there's like a project that you know is gonna come up somewhere in the future, maybe the next 5 to 10 years. But you don't have it fully fleshed out yet. We can put a form in that basically says, here's a project without any of the details that we want the select board, town management, the finance committee should just be aware of. So that way, as it sort of crystallizes into something more concrete or fundable or whatever, it can kind of get popped on the 5-year capital plan, but it doesn't get lost.
Right, there was, as you know, a DPW sponsored feasibility study, I believe it was 2020.
Yeah.
5 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
And we've advocated for it to move forward and nothing's happened, so anyway,
Yeah.
maybe offline, we
Yeah.
can talk about. How
Yeah.
we can be more effective in, maybe it is this future form. I'm hoping it's not 5 years before this moves forward, because if it's externally funded or CPC funded. Does it still have to go through your 5-year capital plan?
Yeah, so the 5-year capital plan, the way, I guess it depends, right? If it was a private person or a private agency proposing it, the answer would be no. If it's the town who's advocating it
Yeah,
for
it
it,
has to
then
be the
the
town.
answer would be yes.
Okay.
It's one of the options in the farm. You, so like a lot of the parks and forestry projects, would fall under that.
Okay, well, I've taken too much time now, but I do want to follow up on this and see if the committee as a whole would actually support not only it being in the capital plan, and I guess you have to start at year 5, but also move up in the town goals from, I think it's 36 plus months in the last one, and I'd rather have it.
Yep.
Much sooner.
I can, get back to the experience we had with the Climate Action Plan Committee. We ultimately opted for 2 or 3 goals a year, as recommendations. And this year, actually, the Climate Action Plan Committee did not add any new goals to the town because there are so many in flight. And so recognizing that we really want to land those projects, we didn't want to put anything
Right.
else on the upset the apple cart. As far as process, and I'll defer to the chair on this, it might make sense to come up with a list of possible goals. And then go through a process where this committee votes, and the voting would essentially say, this is what we think the priority should be. It's ultimately not our decision, it's the select board's decision.
Sure.
Decided at the town meeting and FinCom whether or not to fund it. But that was the process we used, and it has been very effective, and I think, you probably talked to Gabby a lot. We've got a lot.
Yeah.
Achieved, and we have a lot in play.
Yeah, and I
in
think,
that process.
and then, yeah.
It's not, we try not to overwhelm the process.
And I think what you're saying is kind of analogous, right? Because in this committee, the big net, right, you have, vehicle safety, pedestrian improvements, bike safety, like you have all of these different things. That they're all gonna compete against each other if you put them all up at the same time.
So one of the questions is like, what is the thing that we can move forward this year that we haven't been able to move forward because of other limitations, staff, funding, knowledge? There could be a variety of things, and I have enough experience with this committee to know where we're blocked, and why we're blocked. So it might be useful to have that as a conversation going forward.
Do you think that those goals could be flushed out at a joint transportation meeting?
Circling back.
Circling back to the, on topic, and like, should we hold it next month? Like, should it be in August? Should we hold that meeting?
That would be a good time. I mean, I think in terms of goals to get onto the calendar for a select board, we're kind of really right up against that meeting.
Should it have been in July?
Probably,
Okay.
in order to get into that goals sequence, but I think if you were to communicate as the chair and the chair of the other committees did the same, that we'd like to put up something in here, in our goals as a priority, keep a little, open slot for that. You might be able to get it, because the budget process is what happens next, right? So the budget process then takes those goals and tries to articulate what are the actual funding asks that need to be made over the, standard, business as usual funding. So that would be my recommendation, is to try to, and there's no reason why the chairs can confer, I think, offline. And as long as we don't have a quorum.
Yep.
On what some of those goals.
Would it also help this group or the joint group to look at the select board's goals, with those timeframes, like those 18 to 24 months, because. When they do set these goals, they set the immediate and they set those 18 to 24.
Yep.
And to James' point, like the rail trail, I believe fell in that 18, 24, 24 beyond, but. The reason I bring that up is because you could look at some of these past select board goals and where those categories are. And rank some of the recommendations for what you'd like to see funded. Based upon where those goals are, request the board, hey, is it possible to move this from here to here, if that makes sense, because. What's happened is, to your point, James, is 5 years ago, we did that feasibility for the trail's been on there, but the trail has slipped.
Right.
From like here to a different category, so it may be useful for this group, whether that's the. Joint or whether it's this group to look at those goals and pull out some of those nuggets. That are already identified
Right.
as a select board goal, and maybe try and ask them to prioritize those as opposed to. Throwing a goal to them that they're not even looking at.
Right.
That's exactly.
We're aligning it with, and, yes.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Because if, I think if you come to them with a goal that they're not already looking at, it's gonna be harder to get some traction on that.
Right.
As opposed to a goal that they already have and saying, hey, could we really make this a goal and. bump
And
it
I
up?
think some of the goals that I've seen, at least the ones that I've looked at from the transportation, traffic and flow, because I have looked at a couple. Some of them can be merged in, meaning you could reprioritize one because it actually kind of is pulling in two separate buckets and say.
Yeah, there's a lot of bleed over.
Yeah,
between
so this
the
is
three.
something that, I think we should focus on, and it would hit this, and half of this comes together, so when they wanna.
And I appreciate what both of you have said, Stephen, you mentioned the strategy not to add new goals from the climate action. We haven't added the goals for 3 years probably. I mean, it's the same one, 3 or 4. The resurfacing, the extension, and then some progress on the big Nita Newton community way. But we realize that's way out there. But anyway, I like your recommendation for this committee to kind of take up this issue maybe at the August meeting.
Put in a joint transportation moving parts,
Well, that's a possibility too. I was thinking
just in this,
work,
Could be this
but
meeting.
I'm open to whatever makes the most sense.
Okay. and maybe we can.
I'll talk offline.
Yeah.
Offline.
It almost seems like the joint committee would be the place for that, only because to the point that I was saying with the cross bleed, there's a lot of things that you talk about here in this committee. That are already being talked about in the TSC and in the rail trail. So it would almost, it may be better to talk about that and try to rank that as a joint committee. Because to Karis's point, something's going to have to give, and maybe those 3 committees, that's the opportunity to advocate and go after one that's actually achievable.
So I love the idea. I question our ability to pull off a joint committee in
Yeah.
August
Mhm.
with vacation. One other strategy, and you could check with town council on this, I believe this is allowed in the open meeting law. A chairs meeting. To align on what you think the short list might be. And then have each chair bring that to their independent meeting, have the independent meetings vote on priorities and then see where things line up. So rather than just having an open dialogue, you guys come up with what we need to vote on.
And you just had a chair, vice chair meeting for the planning board today with the developer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was perfectly fine, then we're gonna bring, that's gonna come up with, the next planning board.
Yeah.
Great, that's perfectly allowed.
Yeah. So Gabby's done that with the chair of the climate action committee. And they came with a list of, I think, 7 items that were possible candidates for moving forward in the next year.
And I think an argument could be made, and you can check with Chris, but because this is a multi-jurisdictional committee, you could say that 3 chairs. Just 3 committees.
Yeah.
You know, and it's still under quorum.
Right.
Check with Chris, but I think that could be done, because typically it's chair, vice chair of a committee.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But you might end up with a quorum with chair, vice chair.
Depending on the committee, but certainly, I'd send a note to Chris and see what he thinks about that, but just because it is a multi-jurisdictional.
Right.
Appointment, but anyways.
All right, I think we'll do that. Then we'll come back in August and, see how we're.
And just to be clear, I'll still advocate on behalf of our other committees.
Sure,
But
absolutely.
it would be great to have a larger voice.
Anything
Yeah.
else?
If you just check to make sure no one's hand is raised, if they're, I haven't seen that in a while. Okay.
Sean Bullion up here.
Okay, yeah, no, so. So, I kind of move into the next, so I kind of on the same cloth here, the strategies for improved coordination and timing on design projects. And, just I was thinking about this Harris Ave and Great Plain Ave and May Street, like we kind of had these designs that we were thinking about. And it took some time for us to discuss it and then come back to it and then come back to it. And then I think there was a point in time where Tyler was like, hey, we need to know today. So like, is there a better way to continue to work on some of these projects and just like keep them in a bin? So when it's time, you can kind of pull it out, you know, like Harris Ave, like maybe we stop it now. And, put on the table, and then in a couple years, or it's like, okay, well, we're gonna work on it now, well, we gotta get back to it and kind of flush details out, so. I don't know if there's a better way to kind of have the projects like. Continually kind of being worked on or kind of fleshed out, or maybe we need to go kind of deeper, maybe that's. Having a bucket to choose from for like these forms or.
Yeah, I do think having that design guide is gonna help, because it'll help us narrow down, like Tyler can look at his 5-year capital plan and flag pretty early. The roads that will fit into that design guide of needing major modification. I'll just echo, I think this is Tyler's second summer with the town, and last summer we did Webster Street and Dedham Ave, so he's been sort of drinking out of a fire hose. And so I would just say, like, I think that, like, I think we would like to program it more, so we're doing more design work in this winter and less design work in the spring, because that's when we want to start planning and coordinating and doing the outreach and that kind of stuff. So I would say timing wise, that would be sort of my thought. Having that design guide will allow, like I said, we'll be able to look at our capital plan for resurfacing and for repaving and say, all right, here are the 15 roads that we're gonna have a blackboard. We're gonna be erasing when we do the paving project. How do we want those markings to go back? And then I think bringing it to the committee and saying, well, okay, of these 15, maybe only 8 of them are ones that we're gonna tackle right now. Or there's a project, or there's a development, or there's a question mark in that particular neighborhood that would put it on pause for the next time.
Yeah.
When is the design guide expected?
So we just, we're scheduling a kickoff meeting now. We finally got everything contracted, and so we may be meeting next week, I think. As a kickoff. One thing I'll just add to what Kara said, definitely in favor. I think this was a learning experience for all of us, really, is that something that may seem like not that complicated of a design, for one stretch of roadway, kids, especially because if we're meeting monthly, it can take some time to work out. The kinks, and also have enough time to make sure that everybody's informed and all that, including the select board. So, but the other sort of X factor is the funding issue again, in terms of, I may know, I look at we look at our capital or our maintenance list, 5-year list, and okay, we're gonna be doing this street next summer. There's gonna be some changes that we will wanna design. I may not have the funding for that design to be contracted at that moment. So, that's one of the reasons why it's not ideal to be funding these things through the TNC disbursement, because it happens once a year. It may not happen at the best time.
And when it goes up next year to over 25,000, we have to allocate it at town meeting.
Exactly, and that handcuffs us even more. So, we can still talk about these things and sort of talk about what our priorities are, and sort of generally what do we think is appropriate? But when it comes to the design, and concepts and contracting and stuff like that, we are a little bit beholden to the funding cycles and, we have to keep that in mind. That's all I'm saying. But I do agree that we should talk about it earlier so that we can kind of get the larger questions nailed down and then work our way towards, so that way that when we do contract for a concept, we're not kind of starting from that super, super broad place and then narrowing it down. We kind of done that a bit already. That I think that's a good idea.
Can you remind us who the contractor is for the design guidelines?
Tool Design Group, they're,
Tool.
so they're one of the consultants on the
Yep.
downtown project.
Yep. And
And they also have done street design guides,
Yep.
the FARC, in Newton, they're part of that process.
Did I hear you correctly that sometimes our monthly meeting makes it less useful for you?
It just in the sense that, I don't have as many, we don't have as many bites of the apple before,
You have to move forward.
12 meetings.
yeah.
Are there times of the year where it might make sense to have a more frequent cadence? Like, is there, if you're on the budget cycle and you want more quick revs, we could meet to like bi-weekly or something like that? Is that something that
Yeah, I mean,
useful to you or a burden? I
it
guess
could,
is the
it could be, a, sort of at the discretion of the chair when we're working on a particular project and we need feedback, before the next meeting. I don't necessarily think we have to have it formalized, like we meet twice in X month. But, I think it could be a good idea to say, we don't really want to wait a whole month before we get that next step of feedback. These are sort of lessons learned from this last cycle.
I think we could do,
We can do digital feedback.
yeah, we could do like a online, like just
As long as we don't.
As long as we post the meeting and hold it publicly.
Yes, you can't reply all.
You can't reply all.
Well,
So
we-
typically,
Tell
what you
everyone.
do is you reply to the chair or to a staff member and they assemble it all and then they discuss that.
yeah, and I mean, I guess we could do like a Zoom,
You
meet,
could,
like just a plain online meeting. I think we can do that.
Yeah, there's notice, right, yeah, that could be done.
Yeah, they extended it for like 2 or 3.
We could do
3 years,
fully
I
remote,
think.
right?
Yeah.
Someone is in the room.
Yeah.
So I mean, we could do a follow-up meeting, we could just kind of call ad hoc, a follow-up meeting on Zoom the next week when it works for everybody, just to review something. I think that might be helpful to help kind of move some of them. If we end up with a situation like we are, I mean, we could get next year, it could just be all like residential, so.
I think the street design guide, to Paris's point, is gonna take care of a lot of this, because once that design guide is there, then it's our playbook for when we're doing these streets, okay, we're gonna implement these elements, and then we bring what things we'd like to roll into that, so I think some of these more in-depth analysis won't be needed, because the street design guide is already there to provide and say, just.
And I think the goal is to get the buy-in on the design guide, so we don't have to worry about each individual incremental project.
Exactly, because then you have those projects, you already know what elements you're gonna incorporate, because we have a guide that says we're gonna do that, as opposed to what I would say one-offs.
Well, there's seems to be an awful lot of one-offs, but yes, I hear what you're saying.
You're always gonna have, oh, what is street design guy, what is that? Like,
Yeah, well,
I wasn't paying attention until you're talking about my street.
on the buy-in, one of the, back to the financial impact of the design guide. Is one of the constituents that needs to look at it FinCom or?
We haven't gotten there yet, but I think it's a direction we've been heading in anyways, when it comes to like, again, making changes to adding bike lanes for the first time in 2021. It's been incremental, right? So it hasn't been a massive, like if we ask for an extra $1 million for sidewalk, or if we ask for the rail trailer, like that's a large financial impact. It hasn't, like probably inflation and some of the other industry challenges have probably been a larger impact on our budget than adding these elements. Now, obviously that scale might tip. One of the things we did put in last year is for an additional FTE. And part of that is to acknowledge the fact that we are doing a lot more with our signs and markings. And getting that one person, a second person to work with, so that way, A, you get redundancy. And then also you're able to accomplish more, so, that would be like the kind of thing that for sure, the finance committee has been looking at. But we will have to think about once we get the design guide, what the implications are financially. I mean, the vast majority of our roads are local roads, right? So it's not a impact everywhere, but, for those
Except the
main
last couple
roads.
years.
We've been doing a lot of, the main roads for sure.
When it rains, it pours.
So, yeah.
And I hope Shane's comment that the design guideline is going to lessen feedback and questioning of the plans. I hope that's true, but I'm not convinced yet that it.
I don't think it's gonna reduce questioning. I think it's gonna reduce the amount of time that we have to put into
That might
make
be.
decisions on what we can and can't do,
Right.
because the design guide's gonna be there to say, these are the things that you implement, if it's this type of.
Yeah, and so when the,
Definitely be helpful.
so the feedback is solicited is when you vary from that for whatever reason, right? So like in this particular case, let's say it says on a road like, Great Plain Ave, you have the width, you add a bike lane. And then, well, we actually look at it, it's like, well, you can't actually add a bike lane for the whole
Right,
length,
right.
because we have this one area of businesses. That's when I think the communication has to happen, like the conversation has to happen, and I will say. There are probably more projects like that in Needham than not, where there's like a one-off area that needs to be focused on.
Mhm.
But it's a lot easier to talk about like a couple blocks than it is to talk about a mile's worth of roadway.
It's good. And then, we'll move on to the Complete Streets Prioritization Plan update. Tyler sent around your notes. Do you want to formalize your notes in here and like formally update the list? And when is the next funding phase for like the one big project in this?
So we have, we are reloaded. And we can utilize that funding for any of the projects on the list at any time,
On the current,
on the current list. One of the projects that is not on the current list is Great Plain Avenue. So that was when we were talking about this months ago, that was sort of the impetus for bringing it back up, because our current list would not allow us to put funds towards that project.
Current list is not this list then? It's the previous list?
No, that is the current list.
Yeah, because the Great Plain is on here. in a couple places.
Great Plain Ave and,
But that section is not,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the,
The envision.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of the projects on the list are partially complete, or there is. Or are part of capital projects that are in the works. So the question is, do we wanna? How do we want to update the list? Do we want to look at it from this standpoint of these projects are substantially complete? Maybe there's a few things on them that still need to be done, but we probably wouldn't apply for funding on them. You know, there's at least 2 projects on there that we can just take off the list because they're completed.
Mhm.
There's an opportunity for projects to be added to the list, but to what degree does this body want to make that determination versus involving the public, select board, whatever.
so the original list was developed through a public process.
Right, so
Is there anything about the word that signifies what the prioritization was at the time, or? No?
Yeah, well. I think yes, well, the first 2 projects were the ones that we chose to do, which were Harris Ave and
yeah,
the intersection of Harris, Dedham, Warren and School. But that's because again, when you go into it the first round, you know what you want to fund. So you know what I mean? Like we put that towards the beginning.
the list that we have publicly posted does not have a ranking.
Correct, but I think it was listed in the order at the time of projects that we thought we were gonna handle and is probably in terms of more likely to less likely.
But that's also our choice, you know, if we'd like to rank them, I mean, maybe that could be an exercise that the committee wants to engage in, is figuring out which ones on the list are most important to.
But a lot of them are done.
Yeah, a lot of them are partially.
Yeah,
And the funding, is it usually like we have a bucket, it's like 500,000?
500,000, yeah. And so you scale your project.
Can it
to
go,
500,000.
is it like one, or can you spread it out, like
You can spread it out.
you can spread it out?
So we did two. We did, Harris was a discrete project from the intersection on Dedham Ave.
Okay,
You're just eligible for the maximum amount every 3 years. So if you use part of it, then during that 3-year period, you're only eligible for the balance. If you wait every 3 years, you can get the maximum amount for one project every 3 years.
And you just got 500,000 for the next. No, you didn't.
We haven't gone for it yet.
Oh, I thought you said
We're eligible for it.
Reloaded.
Eligible, we're reloaded in the sense that we are eligible for the maximum
Okay,
request.
okay, I'm sorry.
We're beyond the 4-year period from the last time we had
Okay,
funds.
okay, so you're eligible for 500,000.
Yeah.
For any of these.
can you, keep it, can you?
It doesn't,
It doesn't.
it doesn't bank. Yeah.
And it doesn't, like, taking it in a year doesn't mean that we have to wait another 3 years after taking.
My understanding is when you take it, the clock resets.
Okay,
So taking it sooner rather than later has an advantage.
So this order is there any specific order to this? It is not.
In the eyes, so keep in mind, we're not entitled to this funding until we apply. So,
Oh.
the projects on that list are the ones that are eligible for the applications.
So there's no way of ranking this?
We can if we'd like, but there's,
And
As far
DPW
as-
hasn't ranked them internally.
well,
Not in
Karis,
a long time.
Karis was saying at the
At the time, we
you knew you were gonna do.
knew we had a bunch of projects.
Yeah.
We knew we wanted to participate in the Complete Streets program, so we applied. And then the Dedham, Harris, that School Street Warren intersection was like one that was like on the radar for the last 20 years as being a high
Mhm.
crash area, as well as meeting a lot of the criteria. They structured them, we worked at TEC on this project, and they structured it where they thought that the projects that had the best sell were also on there. So like being close to a school, being close to an economic center, where you have a lot of,
Yeah.
pedestrians and cars and different modalities. That was one of the reasons that was selected. I'm not sure, it's not a full entitlement, I believe, so I don't think they have to fund the project, is that correct?
no,
Um,
it's just eligible.
it's eligible, so I think we use TEC to give us a little bit of guidance on what they thought would get us a successful project into that funding.
And is it the same? Is it competitive now too, or like, if
It's
we
com-
ask
Yeah.
for it? Okay, so we're not guaranteed, they're not just like, okay, you have $500.
So it's not, it is a competitive process, but I will tell you that relative to other programs, the barrier to entry is lower.
It's probably very similar to well, it is very similar to green communities, in that you have to apply for the funds, you have to put in specific applications. They may deny them, but generally speaking, the projects that were put on this list were designed to be ones that the state would likely fund.
Okay,
So in my opinion, what would be helpful is to have more information from you folks
Yeah.
in terms of, I mean, you mentioned a couple of them are complete, so take them off, so it goes from 22 to 20 right away. And then several are partially complete, which in some cases means almost entirely complete and very little left. I would possibly take those out or group those with some combined budget holdout, if you will. If there's still priorities and you want to finish them up, maybe it's, I don't know, $50,000 for 4 or 5 of these, and maybe I'm way off here, but anyway, having some sense of DPW's priorities and the costs of the remainder, very roughly. I mean, are some of these projects well over $500,000? If so, I mean, maybe not a good choice for this program. I mean, more information about DPW's priorities and potential costs, I think, would be very helpful if this group is going to weigh in at all.
And I have one other is, if there are known accident, injury
Mm.
areas as well.
I actually,
you know, with that as a, like a, I don't know if the Memorial Field across Highland, you know, crosswalks is gonna, you know, are there racks and stuff? I have people tell me all the time, it's a terrible place to be when school gets.
Yeah, I think actually what you're saying makes sense as far as feedback from us, because we also like that, I completely agree with you, and that's being taken care of through a
It is.
different funding project, right? So that is on this list
So, yeah,
and
there's a
maybe
lot of
is it,
folks.
yeah.
Yeah, several are in the Highland Ave tip thing, is mentioned here, so those also could be removed or at least not prioritized here.
Is that what you would suggest? I mean, there's no need to add additional funding to that project in a way that,
So the language of each individual project includes multiple elements that may or may not be what we want anymore. So that's kind of one of the other reasons why we want to look at this list collectively, because there may be, you know, a couple sort of minor pieces of a project that's mostly been completed that maybe we think that the improvement is working pretty well and we probably don't need to add those elements. Or, you know, just in general, are thinking about what is appropriate from the time that this list was created till now. The standards have changed a bit. Maybe we don't, you know, are thinking on bike infrastructure or other things is changed. So, but a lot of them are covered on capital projects that are either in the works or in the hopper, so.
Let me ask a heretical question here, because I hear a lot of us saying, oh, we need more information. We want to know, is this in or out, or is this X or Y or B, and what's the cost and what's the time? Would there be any value to you as DPW to just get a 1 to 10 rating on all of these from everybody?
That's what I was kind of thinking. I think
Okay.
maybe just like. Which ones of, which projects on this list seem important to everyone at this table? Which ones seem less important? Is there anything that's not on the list that we think it should be on the list? You know, maybe that's not the sole factor of what ends up on the list, but we at least have that starting.
Can you add and additional projects could be eligible? I thought this was the list.
So that's, you engage with MassDOT in okay, we're going to be applying for an update to the list. And that process is prescribed as to how you do that, but assuming that the projects are relatively well thought out and that they're not, that they fit within the scope of the program, they will allow you to add those projects.
I would just say, if the original list was created with a public process, any like update to it, additional project in here should also be done in a similar.
Yeah, and I would say, like, again, I'm looking through this and a lot
It's done, right?
a lot of this is done. And there may be new things because of how the town may have evolved in the past 5 years that they're coming to people's minds as far as extra.
It's impressive how much the DPW has accomplished, by the way. So,
And most of which without the resources from program.
We've only done, 1 or 2
yeah,
projects.
so it's, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a great thing to articulate all these goals of projects and then to follow through like that, so.
Yeah, of course, the public process and TEC and everything that was used to create the list, that is a cost. So we have to talk about where is that funding coming from? How do we want that to be structured? What do we want their scope to be? You know, because there isn't really like, it's not, the level of public engagement is sort of at the discretion of the town. So, there could be a lot of public engagement. Why don't we, basically create a whole new list? Why, or there can be limited public engagement. What do we think about the projects that are still on here? Is there any that we don't want to add? We're sourcing that.
We, when we did this, we just had one large public meeting, which I think was like 4 days before everything shut down for COVID. So it was like one of the last really big, engagements. And we actually had a fairly reasonable turnout. I think we had over 70 people there.
Wow.
And again, we sat at small tables, somebody took notes and we sort of just brainstormed ideas. And then that was sort of fed through our DPW machine of like what's, some of the stuff was like sidewalks to nowhere and crosswalks where there aren't sidewalks and that kind of stuff. And then there were ones that really had connectivity to them that we kind of filtered out through that process.
Do you remember if we, how we funded, contract?
Through infrastructure, or we might have done chapter 90 to be honest.
So
I think we did chapter 9.
wouldn't some of these projects come out of STC, but I'm just pops in my mind is, let's say we are talking last time about a pedestrian crossing near the school, was it Emerson? Along Central Ave,
Williams?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, up by the
the
Elliott,
point is,
Cedar Street.
there will certainly will be capital improvements because there will be signal installation, whatever.
Yep.
So would
Is this-
some of that come out of there? What we were talking about, that somebody wanted a crosswalk, signalized crosswalk at
Cedar
a
Street.
street, at an intersecting.
Were they
street
thinking
along-
like one of those hawk signals?
People want to cross Central Street at every block and it's not safe, so that's one of the things we.
I'm just trying to think, like, I don't know if it would be the warrant for a full signal.
No, it wasn't. It would have been.
Oh, just an RFP, okay.
It would-
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So the point is that there must be money in there. So would that be something what would come out of, would be added to this list?
It could be a candidate, yeah.
I mean, so some of these, because we have a lot of things
Yeah,
Bob Wilson is talking about, which are being bubbling up.
so
and
I would
being
say
Analyzed.
the advantage, this was where a consultant might be helpful. I think they want to see something more systemic. So like adding an RFB, I don't think is like the type of project they're looking for. I think they're looking for like more, like, we did a lot of work at Cedar Street before where we added, we changed the curb line, we added some speed signs and some other things. They're looking for like more of that. So I think they'd be looking not for a spot solution, but for more of like a systemic improvement.
Well, we actually at the meeting discussed sort of more of an intersection improvement project. It wasn't just the equipment.
Gotcha.
There was other factors. We were talking about pedestrian refuge islands and other things that would kind of be, because it's, personally, I think that one of the sweet spots of this list is projects that are too expensive for us to handle through our normal maintenance program, but don't quite rise to the level of like Central Great Plain or these
Yeah.
these larger intersection improvement projects. So because they're more have a shorter time horizon, but it's beyond our capabilities to fund through our maintenance budgets.
But this is also design and, this is construction and design?
Yes, either is eligible.
Both parts. So that's certainly something that may be helpful to you too.
Yeah.
Because I
So
don't
there
know
are-
how- because I don't know how much design
Typically-
capability you have in.
Typically, we would fund the design locally and then fund the construction.
Okay.
There are a couple suggestions about this kind of on the table, one that I made about more information and one that Duncan made about, getting us to rank them now. I personally think we could do both, get more information and then rank them, but you obviously don't think that the more information is necessary.
Well, I mean, it's a question of, how much time we wind up spending. And, I was trying to get to the point of if we really just do a rating, not so much a ranking. And then by ranking, then you're looking at the size and the priority and everything, but just hot to cold, 1 to 10, when you read this thing, do you have a smiley face or a frowny face or a question mark or whatever?
Maybe
I
that's
would-
step one.
I was reading through them and I have a I would have a hard time. I think, on South Street between Edgewater and Dedham, it's probably pretty low priority for me, but for the people who live there, it's probably very high priority. And
Actually, even
give them a very big
projects,
smiley
actually
face to get that done,
Yeah.
and so I would have a hard time even just giving them
$150,000
a rating. I think the idea of having the budget and the clean list of what we know is still untouched.
Yeah, I think so. I always see like maybe 4 in here that are untouched, kind of like projects that need to be worked
That
on,
would be a
so.
supplement. I wonder if you could use that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a couple, and I know
It's
that
listed in here.
there's like
projects.
the. Is the Nahoyden. And I think I saw that, right? The
Meadowbrook?
intersection,
Oh.
Parish and Nahoyt
Meadowbrook,
Cemetery, that's on here, right?
Yep.
And you guys have like a proposed, you already have like a proposed, maybe some sort of.
We have a sketch.
With a
Yeah.
sketch.
That's not-
Well, I mean, like, if we've already like started the work on like a sketch on that and we're working towards that. And that looks like a very expensive project. And it's already on the list, and does it cost any more money to like add another one? Like, maybe we should prioritize, like. If there's something on here we could use efficiently now, instead of like going on adding more or like revamping it till the list is like completely done.
Could I be a devil's advocate? though?
Sure, yeah.
If truly most of this is already done, sounds like you guys are doing a great job. Do we really?
It is actually kind of remarkable when you look at the list.
Do you need us to prioritize anything? I think.
I think maybe if we went through the ones that are totally, like, I think what you'd said, so like South Street versus Wilshire Park, right, like. There's not a demand on our side for which needs attention more, so it does become more of like a political issue than a structural issue.
Is one of them a bigger safety issue, maybe?
So one of the things I was just saying to Tyler is we are tentatively in receipt of another bottleneck grant.
We are in receipt,
Okay.
we, for this intersection here.
And so there is a shortfall between what they can fund and what we believe the project will cost, which is about $150,000. And if you look at the way that this is written for South Street, there's crossover. So you could see that $150,000 from Complete Streets could be used to fund the ramps and the, you know, the pedestrian signalization and potentially added to the connectivity between Edgewater. The Edgewater to me is actually the one where I really want to remove the sidewalk on one side of the road, because there's almost over a mile of sidewalk on a road that has almost no vehicle traffic on both sides of the road. So there's an advantage, at least on that perspective, from just having,
We could give them one side, we could take away their sidewalk and give them a sidewalk.
and give them connectivity to the rest of town. So instead of just walking around in a circle, you can now get to safely to all the amenities, that we have once you get on Denman.
Yeah,
This is number 9 on the list.
Yeah, so those, but there's a couple like that actually that are in that bucket of, we have other projects sort of in those neighborhoods that we could utilize resources for that project. And then there's some other ones like Central Ave, Reservoir Street. MassDOT came to us like 3 or 4 years ago with a project that they were gonna do at that intersection, so I'm not sure. It kind of,
That big wide open that becomes.
yeah, and I don't know why they were even doing a project there, like it was
That was,
unclear.
so we asked them about that, towards the end of last year, and they seem to have no clue what we're talking about.
Okay, so,
So.
They did the bridge, they redid that bridge a few years ago.
so I was wondering if it was maybe in the right of way of the bridge and therefore they were gonna improve it, but,
It seems like it may be up to us ultimately, but that's the thing, is like, when this list was created, that the context has changed.
yeah.
did the DPW use this, like, this is all, a lot of this stuff is done, did you use this list when you were doing your regular programming to
Yes, that is,
work on some?
I think that and sort of a chicken and egg, these are also like picadillos that we've had for a long time that also showed up on the list that when funding became available, we moved forward with them.
I mean, no, it seems to me, the DPW folks, Harrison Tyler in particular, and I guess too, have a lot of nuanced knowledge about almost every one of these. And I think that's invaluable. And I don't feel like my input rating them 1 to 10 would be very helpful in my own mind. I'd rather have you folks kind of flesh it out more.
So,
What are the, 3, 4,
Yeah.
5 projects at highest priority that could add up to $500,000? That makes some sense.
I think what might be helpful to begin with is just if we strip out the items that are either partially complete in a different funding source or plan on being funded. Are we missing things? I think that's part of the question as well, and that's the question of, do we go through this process to update our Complete Streets inventory? Or do we say that, no, we want to do all these projects first? Because again, I think, like, for example, when we started doing this project, the like area, Country Way area, there wasn't a lot of demand for pedestrian accommodation in that area. And that totally changed during the pandemic. And we got a lot more feedback that people wanted more pedestrian accommodation. So there may be things like that that have come out. Or to be honest, with the MBTA communities, act, are there neighborhoods that may be more, not on Highland Ave, but on some of the side roads that might have more need. So the context does change.
Well, I guess I see a value in updating it if you're using it on a kind of year-to-year basis to tackle some kind of pain points for people. I guess if that's how this list was created originally, so I guess I would like to see it updated in the same way, as we can, so that it can be another list that can be used to
Burn down.
basically the as we go around. It's kind of like, we've done with the bike network or something else, like this is
And I might put,
Oh,
sorry, I just might put on here too, there's a lot of development also happening, so like Gould Street's on here, but that's hopefully gonna be taken care of by the Muzzy project. And I'm looking and there's about 3 of them that I see where I'm like, the one reservoir at Central with the Pinellas building, if that gets redeveloped in a new direction, so there's a lot that's also out there.
Honeywell's on this as well, right?
Sorry?
Is Honeywell on this?
Yes, yeah.
In the public process that we had a number of years ago, was it a blank slate or did the DPW present?
No, it was a blank
These
slate,
some-
so it was basically like, what would you like to see us spend these resources on? Like, where are the areas that you feel like there's a missing link or
And
connectivity
you
point?
introduced the complete streets concept at the beginning of that, so they understand what's, okay.
You do, but then you still get those.
Okay,
Why isn't there a crosswalk from my house across the busiest street in Needham
yeah,
to the corner that doesn't have a ramp?
that's not gonna go away,
but
but
I mean, the list looked good from like, whatever.
The,
it was
the
derived
open
from.
format worked out well, we had, like I said, we had people at tables of like 8 or 9 people
That'd be a
and.
great idea to do again then. If it worked well, it'd be great to do that.
We've seen, I think we've even seen like GPI, they did it for some town, right? They had this nice story.
Joint
about,
committee.
like, GIS.
It could be a joint meeting.
They had some website with their
No.
complete streets projects that you could click on and see like what was done and what's going on.
September meet.
and the last one was pre-pandemic, so 5 years or so.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah,
yeah,
so-
just before everything shut down,
it's-
so.
I mean, yeah, I agree, it's probably time and, notwithstanding what the expense is, Tyler, I think it is useful to do.
It'd be worth just
Have
chatting
to
with
figure out how to
TC.
pay for it, I guess, but.
Yeah, well, maybe chapter 90.
Okay.
I know that there may be some qualms with using it on consultants.
Yeah, no, but we'll
Start the
certainly
process.
discuss, and again, maybe this is something, if we have to, it goes on our budget for 27.
Can that go on the complete streets list, updating the complete streets list and then we can.
No, the initial grant we actually did get. I apologize, the initial grant included funding for a prioritization plan. That's
Oh,
how we
right.
funded it.
Yeah, that's what it is that when your tier, cause there's 3 tiers, as you go up to tier 3, they provide you assistance towards a consultant to help you develop the list, but then after you have the tier 3, you're cut off and you gotta fund it yourself. Yeah, that's good
Is
too.
there anything that can be done, just by looking at the GIS to identify possible projects? And I'll give you an example. I'm not gonna advocate to it because, conflicts of interest here. But at the end of our street, Flowers and Melrose.
Yeah.
There's a constant radius turn that invites the cars turning right on Powers to maintain a 30-mile-per-hour speed as they go around the corner. And all of our neighbors have engines, towers, right? And I'm wondering how many, that doesn't look like something we would ever put in today. How many roads like that or corners like that still exist? Could we identify them and say, let's get rid of all of these?
I don't think our existing GIS
Would have that.
has good radial.
Okay, we can get to that level.
Yeah, it doesn't. I wish it did, but it doesn't.
Okay.
You would have to set very specific, like, the parameters would not be applicable across.
It's all line,
intersections.
it's line, work, if they don't have like a polygon for each intersection, so they don't have like the. Is it a 90-degree turn or is it, yeah,
It's not
Yeah.
sophisticated enough.
yeah.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so can you like scrub the list a little bit? And then.
Okay.
and
We
then-
could just redline what we've done.
Yeah,
and
I
then you
thought
can
about
see.
color coding stuff because that's like what I do with everything. And then I was like, oh, it's gonna be like, it's gonna look wacky. There's gonna be so many different colors on it.
It'd be good if they
So
just
I
like
figured we
went,
do black and white first and then.
if it just went away, like you just couldn't see it, like what are we left with?
Yeah.
Is it only like 2 or 3?
I think it'd be smaller than you think.
Yeah, it looks small.
And each of the sections that still have stuff pending, it would be like a couple lines. It wouldn't be.
Yeah, cause a
vast
lot of the
majority
things that are
it.
like partially complete are like, oh, we never put the sign that says solar glare, or we
Yeah.
never, you know, we didn't, we didn't relocate the crosswalk from here to there. Or there's like those one-off issues that are within the larger projects where we did like 95% of it, but
You put the Jersey barriers out instead of a bump out, for example.
yeah.
But the conclusion here is to have this public meeting, to hold off on formally updating until after that. And yet try not to hold you folks up too long to actually apply.
Yeah,
Is that, I mean, is.
yeah, I
is
think
that
that's a
the
struggle and I think I'm concerned more broadly about like public meeting fatigue, I guess, between the reworking of Envision, the tree committee,
Sure.
like there's a lot, like the Pollard School, there's like a lot of public meetings,
Especially
so.
if we're doing the street design guy as well, which is very related.
I wonder if there's some overlap we can.
Well, another option, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, might be to focus on the
Yeah.
existing current list. And then a year from now, open it up or whenever it makes
For the
sense.
next round.
And do a public process. I don't know. I'm just.
Yeah.
talking-
I think that makes sense. So to look for what, if there's something we can fund now that exists here, get the funding for it and then continue the plan to do another formal update to that after we've gotten the money and spent it. And
Yeah.
it seems like the best way to, and if there's something
It's
on
an
there
option for sure.
that fits the bill and can, kind of take up the funding and take it out of the way and again.
Yeah, just so everyone's aware, the applications for the projects, individual projects are due, May 1st.
Of next year,
Yeah,
Next year.
Wow.
just a little time.
yeah, plenty of time, right? Until April and then we have these.
The application for the 500 or for the individual projects?
Your choice, dealer's choice.
Okay. So there is some time to think about it.
But the time goes fast.
Yes.
Time goes by.
Especially on monthly cadences.
Okay. So next month we'll take another look at
Okay,
reduced list.
Yeah, great.
Okay. And then, 7:59, we're a little over here, but yeah. There's any other comments online?
Nope.
Motions to adjourn.
So. Second.
Okay, so we'll take a roll call vote. The chair votes aye. Duncan Allen. Aye. Gus Streisand. Stephen Frail.
I.
James Goldstein.
Aye.
Hussam Kwan.
Aye.
Paul Malta.
Aye.
And the motion passes, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Somebody going to application.